Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I am so excited to introduce to you someone who has become very special to me over the last year. We have Megan Ladd with us, who is a life coach for business owners. And I've been coaching with her for a year now. And I am telling you, I just told her this a few minutes ago, but she has ruined me to ever coach with anybody else. She is the most genuine, tender, darling, wise, loving, kind, encouraging coach I think I've ever met. So I'm so glad that you're going to get to meet her today and hear from her about her experience of being a coach, becoming a coach, all of that. So Megan, welcome to the podcast, first of all.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here.
Yes. Now I want you to tell us a little bit about your journey, deciding to become a coach, that kind of thing. And then I have some juicy questions for you.
Ooh, okay. So I grew up in a house where both my parents were therapists, are still therapists, and ran their practice out of our home. And I was always surrounded by, psychology books and just from a young age interested in human behavior, just people, right? Just really interested in people. And it's funny because they used to have these little white noise machines outside of their offices so that, the sessions were confidential. And fast forward to today, I'm in my house working from home with a little white noise machine outside my office. I've kind of like recreated that. But I think, I was very drawn to what they did and interested in that sort of thing growing up. But therapy always felt like an almost fit. And I just couldn't put my finger on it, but I was drawn to it. But I was like, it's not quite the thing. And I even applied to every college except for the one I attended as a psych major. And then I just went in a totally different direction, studied communication, thought I'd be a magazine editor. But 10 days into my first quote unquote real world job, I went to this networking event. I met a coach. I had no idea coaching existed. It was still fairly new at the time. And she just blew my mind. She just held such beautiful space for us. She got us all to drop our professional networking masks. You're kind of nervous going into those and want to make a good impression. It can be easy to be in your head. And she just got us all to be so real with each other and just share what was actually going on. A lot of us were in our early 20s, and that can be just an interesting time as you're figuring out who you are and just trying to navigate real life for the first time. And I made some great connections, and I was pretty much in awe of this woman. And I told my best friend the next day, I think I want to be a coach. Like there's this thing, it's kind of like therapy. It reminds me a little bit of what my parents do, but it has a different feel to it. And I was so intrigued. So I kind of went down the rabbit hole and found out what programs she went to. And I was living in LA at the time, and there was like a big personal growth community. So I started going to different events, and I was just fascinated. So I think it starts this way for a lot of people, but it's like you learn that coaching exists, you hear something on a podcast. At the time, online summits were like really, really big. Like there would be 20 speakers over the course of a few days. I was just like a little bit bored in my day job, and I had some downtime. So, I had my headphones in, I was just absorbing all the material, and I could not get enough of it. And again, I find it starts this way with a lot of people who are into coaching. It's like, you discover it, you're exposed to it in some way, and then you just want to learn more. And then you start experiencing some of the benefits of it. Maybe things start to shift in your life a little bit just by exposing yourself to like a book or a podcast. And it's like the best thing ever. And it's hard to, if you're interested in it, if it's a genuine fit for you, it's like there's no turning back. I find it starts that way for a lot of people. Like once you discover coaching, it's like no turning back in the best possible way. No turning back. No turning back. So that's kind of, and I ultimately went to that same program and then started my own practice. And that was 7 years ago. And I have never even thought about doing anything else for the rest of my life because I think it's the most fulfilling job in the world. So that's how I got into it.
That's amazing. I'm curious though, like, okay, so you have this real job.
Yeah.
I put that in air quotes if you're not watching the video podcast. I'm very familiar with having a real job and then giving it up for something like this and nobody understands. So you had this real job, but you feel so pulled
Yeah.
dare I even say called to this amazing new back then profession. So how did you navigate that? I'm just even wondering, like, how did you start talking about it with your parents, with your friends? Like, I'm thinking of making this change. And what was that like for you when you first started to know, like, I think I'm going to have to do this?
Yes, that's actually a great question because I'm realizing I kind of glossed over that part, but it was actually like 2 years of trying to navigate that because I was confused. First of all, my mind was blown. I had that gut instinct. I think this is what I'm meant to do. This feels right.
Yeah.
And then, of course, all the thoughts come in, and my brain tried to talk me out of it. And it was like, how do you even become a coach? Like, are you just, how would you even start your own business? Like, what even is this industry? Like, it's so new. Like, what will your parents think? And they've been
Yeah.
supportive, but at the time I was like, I don't know. It's kind of like felt a little like it's not therapy, and therapy felt really established, but it was just this like new unknown thing. So at the time, especially, I feel like just the life stage I was in, I was more concerned about what people think. I think it's
Yes.
human to just wonder about that, but I just felt like a little unsure of myself, and I was, even though it was early on, I was unhappy in that first job. Like I very clearly felt like it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And it was as great company. I was working at Paramount Pictures, but just the entertainment industry didn't feel like a personality fit for me. And so
Mm,
that was kind of confusing because I had interned, I'd done all these entertainment industry internships at film studios. I had interned there before, and I just kind of thought that this would be my path and I would work my way up the corporate ladder. And I think that can be kind of a confusing moment for a lot of people when you see your life going in one direction and then all of a sudden something new is introduced and you're like, wait a second. So yeah, it was a good 2 years of just basically what I did was I kept taking baby steps. I kept exploring, dipping my toe into the world of coaching, but it
yeah.
wasn't until basically I went from the entertainment industry. I had an opportunity to work with this author, speaker, Danielle Laporte, who was in the self-help space. And I had an opportunity to work with her. And so that was actually my big jump into the personal development space. And
Okay.
it wasn't until I was more in that world that I started my coaching certification, because that was like the biggest leap. That felt like
Yeah.
leaving that track. But it was a lot of second guessing at first, and really
Yeah.
needing to like come back to myself and honor what felt right for me. And the benefit of it is, as you're dipping yourself, your toe into the world of coaching, you can kind of get support with that stuff. So as I'm exploring these deep questions of like, what do I want to do with my life? What is my purpose? If you're going to a coaching weekend or you're going to a workshop, I was actually also working through that
Working on
stuff,
it.
right? So I was like coming back to my own intuition and my own calling. And really like I baby stepped my way there until I made that leap out of the film industry. So that was a big
Well,
moment. Yeah.
I'm so proud of you. It took you 2 years. I think it took me 20. It's funny because when I started practicing medicine, I had this, like, there was so much about it that I loved, but there was also so much of me that I felt like I couldn't bring.
Mm.
So there was the person who wanted to work in a space that looks like this, a beautiful office with plants and, paintings
Yeah.
and all of that. There was the part of me that was curious about the people that I was helping. I would like find myself driving one of my patients home to try to figure out like why they weren't taking their medication. And my husband, who's also a physician, is like, you can't just drive your patients home. Like, I know, but like, I just found a surgeon told me this one time, like, you're way too interested in people. And I'm like, that
Oh,
was such a clue back then
yeah.
to, yeah, the parts of me that I feel like I couldn't fully express in that
Yes.
setting.
Oh my
And
gosh. Yes, I relate so much. Literally, I came in as an executive assistant, and part of your job is to basically be the barrier between like people trying to reach out to your boss, so you take the
yes,
calls and you're like that wall to kind of protect their time and energy. same thing. I was told at one point that I was like too friendly. Like I needed
Yes.
to like not be as interested in people, right? Like you're not doing your job. And I just remember being like, same exact, it's a clue, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're like, oh, I'm far too interested in people. How could that be my superpower? Oh, I'm
Yes.
going to be a coach now. Yeah. I think that's so cool because I think it's so easy then to, like, back then I didn't have coaching tools. So I just made myself wrong for all the ways that I didn't really truly fit,
Yes.
into the mold. And my journey was much longer, but I really do think being willing to, like, I always had this sort of inner wisdom, like I love parts of this, but not quite yet. And when I decided to become a coach, I was like, oh, this is how it all fits together.
Yes. I think it is that kind of feeling too. Like sometimes when people picture finding their purpose or finding the job that really lights them up, it's like, oh, and like sometimes it is. But for me, and it sounds like you experienced some of this too, it's like a relaxing into it, like, oh, like, yes, like this just feels so good, so right.
Yeah, like coming home, like, oh,
Yes.
this is what I've always known. And actually, I say this a lot of times to the people who are interested in joining my certification is that when you look back, you've kind of always been a coach. And when
Yeah.
I look back, my role as a physician was way more as a coach or counselor, I think, than like as a technician scientist. I was way more interested in all the things that were emotionally and mentally contributing to their illness because I
Yeah.
had this sense that it's so all connected that if we could get at that, we could really help people in profound ways. And it's crazy because I just interviewed one of my coaches and she said that when she found me, she was basically bedridden and she had so much autoimmune disease and so much fatigue, like so many
Mhm.
issues. And as her mind and heart healed, so her body followed suit. And it's so interesting to me now because even though I don't practice medicine anymore, but I feel like the coaching, the transformation that I watch happen in people is so magical. And you'll watch the body follow suit to the
Yes.
mind and emotions, which brings me to something that I feel like you are so genius at. After coaching with you for a year, I've learned so much myself as a coach,
Mm.
coaching with you because you have such powerful intuition. And I feel like you're so good at helping. You've helped me so much process emotion, recognize the importance of emotion, and expand my capacity to feel emotion in both directions.
Mm.
So I'm curious, like how did that sort of become like your signature thing? Like, were you always? Because you're not. It's funny because I have other coaches that are like strong, like I would say strong mindset coaches, but I feel like you have this way of integrating all the parts of us, like a really holistic view of coaching that I don't see, as often.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like it really evolved over time, kind of organically. And the only thing I can think of is just through my own work in the personal development space. My first entry into the world of coaching was actually through shifting my relationship with my body. And the first coach that I worked with, actually, where she got her start was really learning to love your body. And I remember some of that work was like forming a relationship with your body. And, I went to USC in Los Angeles. I remember there were like so many beautiful people. I'd never seen so many beautiful people in my life. And I remember around spring break, there was like kind of this like strong diet culture. And I had gained like the freshman 15. And I was just feeling a little different in my body. I'd grown up dancing. I'd never really thought about it. And I just felt different. And I remember she really helped me learn how to connect with my body in a different way and really view it as like a partnership with my body. And
Mm.
that was the foundation of my work, just being coached and in this self-help space. And I think it set this foundation of just learning to tune into my body so much. And that was, over a decade ago now. And so I think it's just how I kind of learned to be with myself. And it was that base layer. And so over the years in working with clients, I think I picture it like a toolkit, and you have like the more thought-based stuff and the mindset stuff, and sometimes a more intuitive approach. And then really like dropping into your body, I think has helped me process emotions so deeply that I just started doing it with clients at a point, and like really diving in there and using it as a way to excavate like held emotion, trapped emotion, and just explore it with curiosity so that people could, bring in some of that self-compassion. So it kind of developed organically, where I was just trying it with clients, and then it worked so well. And I was like, wow, people can really like move through things and release that judgment that they might otherwise be having towards an emotion they're feeling, especially, shame is like a great one to release, because it, first of all, it feels horrible when it's just within your being. But then if you have this like safe space to just get curious and release it, I mean, talk about like a shift within one session. So I would say it kind of happened just organically over time through my own personal experience, and then weaving it into my work. And, it's fun when you're coaching and you're trying something and you're seeing like, wow, this is really transformative for them too. And so I kind of, as a practice, have just like doubled down on what works and just like, created those tools over time,
Yeah. And would you say that your experience with watching people and their own transformation by doing that, would you say that that is one of your most powerful like tools in your tool belt when you think of like the different techniques you might use or tools that you might use?
I think so. I would say one of my coaching superpowers is paying attention to people's energy, and like really, I think holding a compassionate space. And that's also come from like really working on my relationship with myself, and like becoming so compassionate with myself so I can really offer that to people. But, you know, I love how every coach can have their own superpower. I would say I'm very perceptive, and I'm like very in tune when I'm watching someone, or honestly, most of my coaching sessions are over the phone. So I hear it. Sometimes I even close my eyes when I'm on the phone, and I'm just tuning into their energy. And I love picking up on those subtle shifts that they might not even notice. So you
Yes.
can picture it like all the coaches out there, we all have our little superpowers or big superpowers, and it's like different strengths, right? And I think that's one that it's like, ooh, I can like really hone in on what someone is feeling and reflect it back, even if they're not fully seeing it. And then organize these different parts. And my brain, I feel like sometimes works like a puzzle, where it just like pulls all these pieces together and like connects the dots. So
I
I
do
would
feel
say,
like
yeah.
I don't think I've ever worked with anybody who does this as masterfully as you do, but you have an uncanny ability to do that. Like to
Oh,
just really hear the pieces, like that reflection back, but also tuning into maybe what's underneath that and like pulling that all together. Like I'm always amazed at the end of the session. I'm like, wow, that was like so masterful.
oh, thank
How
you.
you do that. It really is such a gift.
Thank you. I think, something that, and I would say this for anyone who's a coach or thinking about becoming a coach, is one of the most beautiful things about doing this for a living is you get to bring all these different parts of you that might seem kind of random, that are just your strengths as a human, and bring them to the way that you coach. And I've always loved organization. If you can see my bookshelf, I love organizing things. Like my mind just organizes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can apply this to coaching, where I literally can just take all these kind of miscellaneous parts and like help people tie them together. And then it really helps people. Like, what a beautiful thing. And so I think that's fun to think about for anyone, right? It's like, what are even the things you were drawn to as a kid growing up, right? I was over there like organizing blocks. Right now I'm organizing thoughts. So as a kid, what was your thing? Like you can find, and I used to always love playing school with a whiteboard. And when I do video sessions, I nerd out on my whiteboard, right? It's so cool to see how you can bring these parts of yourself back into the current picture.
So, so true. Yeah, I can look back at parts of my young childhood, um, my teenage years and go, oh, that's when that started to develop. It is really cool to see how that's what I think I love so much too. Like I was telling you this earlier, but I really do feel like this is such a dream life to be able to help people in this way, do it in a way that feels nourishing to me and to the people I help, and get to prioritize my family and my faith. Like, it has just opened up so many incredible opportunities. I'm curious for you how you chose, like, how did you land on, because you have such a cool niche, like the joy coach. First of all, who doesn't need a joy coach in their life? I remember too, when I hired you, I was like, oh, this is my year of joy. And I hired a joy
Yes.
coach. So how did you land on that? And then how did you sort of like, oh, I think it's going to be entrepreneurs that I mostly focus on helping?
Yeah. So the joy coach was always an undercurrent. Like, it's how I thought of myself behind the scenes. And honestly, the main thing that kind of talked me out of putting that out there to begin with was like my brain, those thoughts that are like, you're supposed to pick this, like business coach or life coach or whatever, something more straightforward. And from like a straight up quote unquote marketing perspective, I thought, I don't know if anybody's searching like in a search
For a
bar
joy
for
coach.
the joy coach, right? And I was like, well, but at some point it just felt like this is just who I am and this speaks to what I do. And I'll be honest, I even had thoughts at some point like this could really trigger some people, and I'm sure it does trigger some people because it really is like speaking to that one side of the spectrum. And I was like, maybe this will be misunderstood. I don't want people to think I'm just bypassing the negative emotion.
Yes.
As you know, I deeply believe that like opening up to all of it expands your capacity for joy. But at a certain point, then it was like, this is who I am. I feel like my people, the people who I'm meant to work with, will resonate with this. Like, we'll see each other. They'll be like, oh, that's my coach right there. And I'll be like, that's my client. We're meant to connect.
Yes.
And it came with a healthy releasing of what other people will think, and just opening up to what felt right for me. And so that was just like, no matter who I was working with, like that just felt like the essence of what I wanted to put out into the world. Entrepreneurs. So I lived in San Diego when I was starting my practice, and there were all these amazing, such a cool community of entrepreneurs, all these amazing meetups for business owners. And at the time, remote work wasn't as much of a thing. And San Diego doesn't have a ton of industry. Like, there's biotech and there's some companies, but it had a strong entrepreneur community. Basically, to live in this beautiful place, it's like a lot of business owners. And I just met the most inspiring people. A lot of them were like female business owner meetups. And I was just so inspired by what all these amazing women were doing. And I loved the energy. And I really started to see how starting your own business brings up all your stuff. It's like the advanced course of personal development. And from a coach perspective, I started to nerd out because I'm like, oh my God, there's so much good stuff to work with, right? Like, and I found that people who chose to start their own business had this desire often to like work on themselves and like create an incredible life and dream big. And so it just kind of organically unfolded where these were people I was around, these were people I resonated with, and I felt so inspired to help them. I loved the way that they dreamed big and were really willing to be courageous and put themselves out there. And it was really fun for me to coach them. So it kind of just naturally fell into place that way.
That's so cool. I tell people all the time the same thing. I just started a program inside my membership called Business Mentoring School. And it's been so fun to teach because you're right. Business brings up all your stuff. If you want to fast track your personal growth, start a business.
Yes.
That's so true. And what would you say? I'm curious. I should have asked you this first, but how do you like think about joy? Like, what does that mean for you?
Think of joy as the essence of who we are. So I think about babies coming into the world, and it's like they are so pure and just like literal, people are like bundles of joy.
Of
right?
joy.
And I think of it as like that is who we all are at our essence. And then as we go through life, of course, we have these different experiences that shape us, and everyone has their own limiting beliefs and patterns that they develop. And I think of coaching as like shedding everything that is not the essence of who you are, and just the healing of that, of like getting back to your true, authentic self. And it is radiant and it is loving and it is joyful. And so it's like a healthy releasing of everything that is not you.
that is amazing. Yeah, we teach this concept in my program about true self and false self. The true self is joyful.
Yes.
And
Yes.
not in a, it's exactly what you're saying too, like not in a avoiding the negative emotion, but in spite of everything, we can be joyful, right? And
Yes.
I love that because I think we have this innate ability to exist there that gets clouded over by so many things. So I love
Yeah.
what you're saying, just releasing everything that's not truly who you are.
Yes.
That's
And it's
that's
great
good.
that you say clouded over, because I think I shared this in your program before, but it's like I will think of joy as the sun, like it's always present. And then just the pressure we put on ourselves and the self-doubt we feel and the fears that we experience are like clouds where it's clouding it over. And sometimes there's a lot of clouds and you can't even see the sun, right? But we
Yes.
have the power within us to clear those clouds. And some of them are more intense than others, but it's like that sun is still ever present. I think that joy is within you. And this is why even the depths of grief, you can still experience like that spark of joy and love and connection, even in the hardest moments of your life.
Yes. What would you say is your favorite part? And maybe like if you're thinking about like your day-to-day life, what's your
Yeah.
favorite parts about being a coach and
Oh my
having this
gosh.
as like your lifestyle?
Uh, there's so many things. I would say I think my favorite, the most fulfilling part is experiencing the shifts, like watching someone have a shift, even within like a single session or within a moment, right? And just like it usually sounds like an exhale or a sigh, or just like, oh, like just those little the ways that aha moments show up, it feels like it is like little miracle moments where you're like, oh my gosh, like, yes, you just see it happen for them.
Yeah.
That's like the best feeling in the world. And I think everything within that and around that, it is such a gift to see someone else's vulnerability. And I could just like cry talking about it because I think that you feel so connected to all humans, right? And like the human experience. And when someone gives you the gift of opening up and really letting you in to help them, it is
Yes.
such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And I love feeling connected. I love all the humans, right? I know we're like that, and a lot of
Yeah.
people are drawn to coaching. It's just like you have a deep love of people and wanting to help people. And vulnerability is one of those things that when you're the one being vulnerable, it takes a lot of courage and it can feel like, oh God, I'm sharing this like the hardest parts of myself.
Yeah.
But to the person viewing, if they can hold that space for you, it's so beautiful. Like you just are like so raw and open, and it's so easy to love people and their vulnerability. And then as that person who's sharing feels seen, and you see them witness the love and the just being witnessed in that moment, it's just a beautiful exchange. I can't think of
It
anything
is.
else
And I
like it.
think when you say that, it reminds me of sometimes because people like us who do this for a living, this is what we do for, this is what we do.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I go in the world, I'm like, oh, this is not how people function. And
Yeah.
it reminds me of what a tremendous gift it is. And that in whatever small way, I can take that into my daily life, into my family, into the people that I interact with on a daily basis. Because I feel like if people had more access to being who they really are, that authenticity, that vulnerability. You mentioned it earlier about wearing masks. Like after I found coaching and got to this place where I felt like, oh, I can just be myself. And that sort of coming home, I just want that for everybody. And I feel like I'm really in tune to when people aren't living that way. Like I can see the masks and I'm like, what can I be an agent to help people drop that and just drop into who they really
Yes.
are, right?
Yes.
And
Uh,
I think it's such a special place to be able to occupy in someone else's life that you can be the agent that sort of helps them keep coming back to that.
yes. And just to see their authentic self, it's a gift to see that in some, it's like, it's such a beautiful quality, right? Like people's authentic selves are so radiant, and sometimes they're just
Yes.
getting used to showing the world that, but as their
Yeah.
coach, they'll show you that. And it's like just a beautiful sight to behold, and just hold that vision with them and like
Yes.
reinforce what a gift they are. It's just, I love, I love it. And I will say it does sometimes create like a little bit of a disconnect for me than just going out into,
Yeah.
normal life,
The
like going.
grocery store.
Yes, yes. I'm like, oh, we're not just having deep conversations all the time. We're like, I'm like, I feel like my husband and I joke, I'm like, I just like forget how to do small talk now. Like I just
So do
don't
I.
like I just don't even know what do people talk about the weather? Like I'm like, what are your dreams?
Me too. I was at the gym the other day. So somebody at my gym is moving. I've got my hand on his shoulder going, oh, like, how are you feeling? Like, he probably doesn't want to talk about that. But
Yeah.
I'm like, I just go straight to the deep end.
Yes, I love
Oh,
it.
I do too. I'm curious, and maybe that we'll wrap up on this, but I'm curious as far as like because this can feel, it doesn't feel heavy to me. And I know that you've done it for long enough and you know how to regulate yourself so that, you're holding this space for people, sometimes in hard moments. What do you think is the key for you to stay? Like for you, what do you think of as the practices that really help you stay in the place where you are
You don't
sort of,
take it on.
you don't take it on, but you're ready and really available to keep helping people in this way?
Yeah, there's two things. One, I would say it definitely was practiced early on. Um, because when I was practicing in my coaching program, I remember even as people were sharing, I would just feel with them. Like it was so hard not to. And I think if you're like an
Yeah.
open-hearted person and that's kind of how you approach life,
Yeah.
it is challenging to not, like, before you've really learned or practiced the skill of holding the space for someone compassionately without going on the emotional roller coaster with them.
Yeah.
That's just what I was doing. And I was like, woo, this is like emotionally exhausting, right? Where I'm just feeling so deeply all the time. And so I think, first of all, just being conscious of it and practicing like separating out. But I think the number one mindset that helps me with this is being really clear on what my role is. And it's like my role is like the guide in this situation, and
Yes.
thinking of myself as a powerful guide where it's like the way I think about it is like I can hold for all of it. Someone can bring any emotion, anything they're feeling to a session. And I love thinking of it as like this powerful space, this powerful room that we're in together where I've just got them. And maybe it's a little bit of a like mama bear energy where it's like, you know, if your kid is hurt or falls down and hurts themselves, like you're kind of like holding the comfort and everything for them. But just it's
Yes.
like, thinking of it as their guide, I can help them the most by being compassionate, but not by going on the ride with them. Cause then I'm just going to be like tossed all about too. And so
Yeah.
just thinking like, what is my role here? Also staying clear in it's not my job to fix them or save them, and really viewing the client as so powerful, so capable. They
Yes.
have everything within them. You are just the guide. So you're not like there to save the day with like a poor, just like damsel in distress. I've
Right.
shared about this before. Like your clients aren't damsels in distress or whatever the male equivalent of that is. It's like they're strong and they are capable, and you just help them see that. So like they've got all the tools, you just remind them they're wearing the tool belt.
I love that so much. It's so relieving too. And I teach my new coaches this. It's so relieving to know that you're not here to fix anything, not even really to give them advice, but to help them
Yes.
find their own wisdom.
Yes.
And I just think it's such a beautiful space to hold where you acknowledge how amazing and powerful and unique and um, resourceful they are to figuring
Yes.
out what their next step is or how they can, show up in their lives the way that they want to.
You know what? One thing that just reminded me of too is something that's really helpful with that is not feeling threatened when they are experiencing threatened emotionally, or like nervous when they are experiencing maybe a negative emotion. And so just knowing and embracing that that's part of the human experience too. And what can
Yeah.
help with that is getting familiar with that in your own life, with your own negative emotions as a coach, right? So it's like the
Yes.
more you don't see that as a problem, the more you can hold. And you know, a lot of times the way people process is by just feeling the feeling intensely for, I mean, even 15 seconds. It's like it moves through them, but they've got to feel it to heal it kind of thing. So
Yep.
actually, if you step in and you're trying to like avoid that with them, they don't get the gift of moving through it on their own. So just knowing and stepping back, it's like, this is for them. This is part of it. They are moving through it. They're releasing it. It's not a bad thing. This is part of the process. Just having that energy and attitude around it is really helpful.
And now everyone knows why Miss Edie has been working with Megan for the last year. My one-on-one coach, such a beautiful, amazing, nurturing mama bear guide.
Oh,
It's
thank
been
you.
an incredible experience. Can you tell our people how they can find you? And I know you
Yeah.
have a new offer now where people can work with you. So just tell us all the things.
Yes. Okay. So you can find me online at megan-ladd.com. So it's MEGAN-LADD.com. And on there, there's a little work with me button. I have a spring offer to spring clean your mind and your business, where we work together one-on-one for 8 weeks. And really, this is about like cleaning from the inside out. So you could picture it like the internal cobwebs, just brushing it off so you can feel radiant and sparkly and fresh. And it happens within a session, but also compounds over the course of time. So that's my offer right now. And I also love Instagram. So you can find me on Instagram at Megladd, MEGLADD.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been so wonderful. And it's been such an honor to know you, to work with you. And I'm so thankful that lots of my people are getting to know you now too. Thank
Yay.
you,
Well, thank
Megan.
you.
All right. See you later. Bye.
Yay.